also UNHCR, but I'll just say UNRWA for now. All of them have expressed concern with Israel's tactics,
which is fair.
So when I asked the question, well, what human rights organizations are you said if the reason you wouldn't just trust Israel on its face, or the reason you would believe Israel is not because they said it, but because it's been substantiated by these other bodies. And when I'm asking, well, which of these other bodies have substantiated it, they've actually done the opposite.
Expressing caution is not done the opposite, right? Anytime there's a military anything, you would expect.
No. They've done more. Okay, so but
Well, has anybody like said like Israel is violating international law?
Yes, Alberto Guterres has done that. The head of the UN, Francesca Albanese has done that.
Have they said Israel is violating international law? Or are they saying it would be a violation of international law if Israel
were? They're saying they are.
If you want, I'm curious. You can shoot me an article and we can read through it right now. I'm curious what the particular claim is. Yeah. Okay. New evidence of unlawful Israeli attacks in Gaza causing massive civilian casualties amid real risk of genocide. Okay. So we can read more of this if you want. And I have no problem doing that. I'm guessing you've read this. So one of my issues sometimes for reporting like this is for a civilian attack. Or I'm sorry, let me be very precise with my language. And then you can tell me if you disagree on the international law on this. If Israel bombs a place and the target is civilians, that is a war crime. You cannot explicitly target civilians. That would be a war crime. Right. If Israel targets a place and there's a military combatant there, but say there's like one ordinary soldier and 100 civilians, and it's almost impossible to make a war effort argument for that much collateral damage, we would consider that a war crime. Now, if there's like 10 key commanders and 100 civilians, well, the proportionality cost gets murky, maybe not a war crime. Here's a fourth scenario that I think is really hard, and it's frustrating when I read these sometimes. There's a big frustration I have with the Goldstone report is, if it's the case, so when Amnesty International investigates, and it looks like 95 civilians, nearly half of them children, killed in 4 unlawful strikes in Rafah. I'm guessing, since you linked me this, the argument that this is going to make is when they did an investigation in the area, there is no evidence that there were military objectives there.
That's literally what they say. Yeah, there was no indication there was no military objectives in or near the houses.
Yep.
And that no one in the house that was hit
was like related to Hamas or anything, right? Yeah.
Yep.
So I think this points in a concerning direction. However, if it was the case that Israel had intelligence at the time or had reason to believe that these were military objectives, it wouldn't be a war crime or a contravention of international law if they did do these strikes, which is one of the reasons why sometimes it's frustrating when these reports are put out and there's no pressure on Israel or there's no reach out to Israel to corroborate why did you do this particular attack. As another example, do you remember after we pulled out of Afghanistan, I believe the United States drone struck, I think it was a Doctors Without Borders hospital. I think a lot of civilians were. It was a horrific. It just sucked. But the reason why that wasn't considered a war crime is because the United States most likely wasn't intentionally trying to kill doctors. There was really bad intel that led to a bad attack, but it wasn't an.
I think that's fair. Yeah. I think that's totally fair. I think the difference is with Israel, we hear case after case, house after house, refugee camp after refugee camp. We keep hearing, oh, we thought there was Hamas there, and all we see is family members, or we see a case where they'll say that someone has some loose affiliation with a terrorist or an armed group. And so we either have to believe that Israel's really bad at this, or we could believe that they are deliberately targeting civilians, right? Which is not necessarily my argument.
Sure, that's fair.
My argument is actually that they're wildly indifferent to whoever they hit.
Sure. So I think the two things I would look at, so I think we both agree, the idea of them like, I'm going to kill this family, probably not happening, because that would be crazy. The argument that you're making is more reasonable.
I'm not completely dismissing that.
Okay, we won't completely dismiss it, but we'll say that's probably a low. But if I'm steel manning your position, if I was to argue your side, I would say maybe Israel's not intentionally targeting them, but the level of discretion that they're using is almost non-existent if they happen to do 4 separate strikes in Rafah where there are no military targets found. Whatever proportionality analysis or intelligence using is woefully inadequate to minimize the risk to civilian casualties, right?
That's right.
So I think that that's a good starting point. We just have to dig into the Israeli side to see their justification for the attack, which I understandably leads to the frustration of like, well, sometimes Israel doesn't always participate. and evidence gathering. So, for instance, for the Goldstone report, I think Israel explicitly
almost
said
never participate in evidence gathering.
Yeah, true. And it's hard to compel a state to do so as long as the state has their own investigatory bodies. Because again, remember the Geneva Convention, you want everybody to participate, and nobody really wants to submit themselves to the ICJ, like having full authority over things, unless there's really, really, really good reason to do so. But like, I would agree, for instance, that this points in a concerning direction, but does not a war crime make, I would say.